Welcome to the Visible Art of Translation podcasts. This series of podcasts are part of the EU-funded INCREC project. Our focus is creativity, translation and technology in literary and audiovisual translation. Our goal with this series is to give visibility to the often invisible skills, role and voice of professional translators.
My name is Xiaolu, a PhD student from the INCREC project. Today we have a very special guest with us who works in a unique and often overlooked field. Have you ever wondered how people with visual impairments enjoy movies, TV shows, or live theater? That's where the incredible skill of audio description comes in. While the crucial work of subtitlers is frequently overlooked, the role of audio describers receives even less recognition. Joining us today is Shak Yousaf. Thank you, Shak, for taking the time and talking to us.
Thank you very much, Xiaolu, for inviting me and your consideration of me. It's good to talk to you.
Shak is an audio describer, audio description manager, and lecturer based in London. With 10 years of experience as the audio description manager at IUNO, Shak brings a wealth of expertise to the field. He also teaches audio description at University College London in the autumn and at the University of Leeds in the spring. The courses he has created and designed are grounded in his extensive knowledge and experience. So, Shak, could you start by telling us a bit more about yourself? For example, how did you decide to become an audio describer and how did you get there?
Yeah, it was a little bit of an accident, I have to admit to you. In about 2011, I was a radio presenter at that time, and I was simply looking for more freelance work, specifically work related to using my voice, maybe as a voiceover. And a friend who had done some small pieces of AD told me about the service, which I had never heard of. And she recommended me a company to approach who she had worked with. So I simply called them. I had a little chat with them, told them about what I was doing at the time, radio presenting and my history with it. And they invited me in for a little bit of training. After about a month, I got my first job. And really, the rest is history. I became a freelance audio description writer and voiceover for about a year and a half before I joined the company where I am now. And now I've been here for nearly 11 years.
Okay, so basically you started like 13 years ago.
In total, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Can you explain a bit more about what exactly audio description is and why it is so important?
Yeah, audio description is an accessibility service for people who are blind or have low vision or visual impairments. And it simply helps them to understand and enjoy visual content, which of course they can't see. So, predominantly, my experience and knowledge is in the field of movies and TV. So, across streaming platforms, across broadcast TV channels, and home video. That's where my experience lies. But actually, AD, especially in the UK, is also prevalent in other mediums, such as live theatre, exhibitions, museums. These all feature pieces of AD, but it really helps your content to be more inclusive of people with some disabilities.
Yes, so it seems like audio description is kind of well developed in the UK. So how do you think the development of audio description varies across different regions?
It definitely is well developed in the UK. In fact, I would say that the UK is the most advanced country in the world who creates and produces AD. So outside of the UK, even the US produces less according to the kind of population that they have and the number of blind people. Outside of the UK and US, it is definitely growing in Europe and there is a presence for it. I would say that some of the Scandinavian countries are leaders in AD when it comes to outside the UK. Germany is also very good.
Hmm.
Elsewhere, it's very little, it's less common. And in some countries, particularly I'm thinking of the Baltic regions, it's almost unheard of. And then outside of Europe, especially in the Asian region, it's very, very small. But
Hmm.
there are beginning to be some developments, some small projects that are coming to light in those lesser countries where AD is not very well known.
Okay. As far as I know, there are different approaches to creating audio descriptions, such as writing them from scratch and translating them from another language. So could you explain more about these two methods?
Yeah, both practices are valid and acceptable. And actually, it also comes down to the person doing the AD, whether they feel comfortable simply translating the script or whether they have enough knowledge to use the English script as a guide to create their own AD anyway. So, one practice is that, let's say, for example, if you have AD being produced in German, do you write it in German straight away, or do you translate it from an English AD script? Well, it depends on a couple of things. One of the main things is that what language is the content in? Because really, the content to be able to write English, the content itself, the video, let's say, has to be in English so that the AD writer can follow it, can understand it. If it's not in English, it's not impossible to follow it, but it's very, very much harder because they need something. So if they're not hearing English dialogue to follow the program, then they need something else. That could be burned in English subtitles on the screen. That would help. Or the dialogue, let's say, remains in German, but they have an English production script which they can use to follow the dialogue. Now, that is possible, but it does make the work a lot longer because you can imagine rather than looking at the video and following the dialogue there directly, either through the sound or through the subtitles. Compare that to having a separate document, and then you have to constantly scan the document, follow the progress of the time codes where the video is moving to, check what the script says, then go back to the video. It's a much more long-winded process. So I suppose it's most ideal if the translator writes from scratch, but the problem is that they must have the knowledge and the experience and the skills to do that because AD is a hard skill to learn. And to write from scratch is quite an overburdening task if you've never written AD. And also, it's an issue because, as I said, across Europe, the levels of knowledge about AD vary. So if you're asking someone to write AD in Serbian, for example, and you need it to be written from scratch, almost certainly that person would be doing it for the first time. So that's a difficult task. So having the English template does provide a lot of benefit because most of the work, most of the creative work and the hard decisions are taken away from the translator.
Okay, yes. So based on your experience, like which method is more commonly used, like for example in the UK?
I would say that the translation method from an English script, then translating it, is more common and has been for a few years simply because there is more experience in the UK to be able to write AD. That's the main factor why translation is common. However, certainly in the last year, I am seeing much more of an increase in more people learning to write AD in their own language.
Okay. So since our podcast focuses on translation and you are an audio description manager, could you describe the workflow involved in translating audio descriptions?
Yeah, so I have a pool of writers and voiceovers in various languages.
Mm.
What will typically happen is that one of my colleagues who's on the sales side, who talks to the clients to get the work from them, they will give me a project based on a certain number of episodes or a certain number of hours, and they will tell me we need AD in this language or this many languages. What will it cost and how long will it take to do it? So I will look at the overall scope of the project. I will think to myself, how many resources or freelancers do I need to fulfill the project depending on the volume? Have I got enough people? Are they skilled enough? Do they have the relevant skills? And then once I've decided that, I will draw up a timeline and I will contact all of the people that need to be involved in the project, the writers and the voiceovers, and I will simply delegate the work to them. I'll wait for the material to come to me, the material being the video and the script for each episode. Once I have those, then I'll get in touch with the writers, I'll send them the material, and we'll start the production work. And I'll give them all deadlines and communicate that to my colleagues, and then just fulfill the project from start to finish.
Okay, then let's shift our focus to another key aspect of our podcast, creativity. How would you define creativity in the context of audio description?
Creativity plays a big part in AD because unlike subtitles where you're transcribing what you hear, and in a sense that work is done for you, creativity plays a huge part in AD because writing AD, let's say to a movie or anything, is basically a blank page. The movie has nothing in it. The viewer is going to be relying on your storytelling for them to understand what is happening. So you have a blank page. You need to describe all of the elements which you think are the most important for the viewer to enjoy and understand the movie. And all those decisions are up to you. Now, you do learn about prioritizing and you begin to learn and develop the skill for what is more critical for a viewer to know and what are more interesting things for them to know. These are skills that you develop over time. And you have a framework and a guideline of what AD is, and maybe it steers you in a particular direction. But ultimately, all the decisions about what you choose to write about are down to you. And that is all about creativity. How can you use engaging language to keep the viewer's interest? And how can you tell them a story which is engaging and interesting? All of that will come through creative language and good decision making.
Yes. So the next question is also related to creativity. So how would you describe the creative process? So what steps do you take when writing audio description? For example, we have a few like steps such as documentation to capture and search for information, or the consideration of constraints. And for example, you want to take a walk to have some fresh air in the environment, something like that. So what the steps do you take?
Well, creative process. We have some written guidelines which are freely available on the internet
Yes.
by some of the big broadcasters, which anyone can download and look at. And those are really good summaries.
Mm-hmm.
To supplement that, my role is to also develop new talents, new writers, new voiceovers, to steer them in the right direction, to give them feedback and pointers. So we kind of supplement the guidelines by giving training on what we really want in a style of AD. Also, I feedback work. I take notes on where writers are doing things particularly well and where they could improve. I give that kind of feedback as well. And also, I suppose it's worth saying in this process that part of the process is, of course, using software. So we use specifically designed software, which is particular to AD, which makes it very easy and efficient to write and voice AD inside the same application. So with a couple of hotkeys and commands, you press buttons which determine in and out time codes. You're able to write your description inside those time codes. You read them aloud against the video to judge the timing. All of these things play a part, and AD software is crucial for that because it really makes the job a lot easier overall.
Yes. So what platforms or software do like audio describers or do you typically use?
We do use a variety of software, not too many. We don't want the workflow to get too messy. So generally, we like to centralize what people are using. But I would say most commonly, and certainly for voiceovers, we use Stella by a company called Yellow Umbrella. It's a cloud-based platform. You can write and voice AD on it. You can use it for subtitling, for dubbing. And it's also developing all the time because it's one of the newer software available over the last few years on the market. So it's improved over the years, and we rely on it heavily now, particularly for voicing, because it allows any voiceover, as long as they've got a home studio, to record AD from home and to do it in the most efficient manner. There is really nothing better than doing it this way in terms of time and efficiency.
Okay. So are you familiar with automation in audio description? Do you think it will be achieved in the future or it has been achieved now?
It certainly hasn't been achieved now. There are certain practices or processes within the workflow that can be automated. For example, let's say the way that you set up a project for it to be recognized in the software, the way that you export a project or follow certain steps at the end. These things can be automated, but you wouldn't be able to automate the writing of AD. You could, I suppose, use synthetic voicing, machine voicing in some circumstances for projects if that is even desired. That is a growing possibility. But I can't see how you would automate the writing of AD. It's simply, I can't, the technology isn't there. It hasn't been developed. I think it would be too hard to transcribe visuals into engaging language And I think we're quite a long time away from having an automated workflow in AD fully.
Yeah, so do you believe the creativity required in the process of writing or translating audio descriptions influences the level of automation that can be achieved in audio description?
Definitely. I think it's critical. I think it's if the automation wants to take over, as it were, it's the number one obstacle. The creativity and the skill of the writer is something that you can't replicate, certainly not now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jack, for participating in our podcast.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
Thank you again to our invited speaker, and to our listeners. Thank you for being there, and feel free to share our podcasts with your family, friends, and colleagues. This is part of a series of podcasts of the EU-funded INCREC project. So follow us for more episodes, and please share your comments on this platform. See you next time.